Good evening to you all. On behalf of the staff and the board of the PMI, I would like to welcome you all to the PMI Victorian History Library and our event tonight. My name is Lauren and I'm the Chief Librarian. The PMI wishes to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we live. We are located on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always Aboriginal land. Firstly, I'd like to point out the facilities. The bathroom is located through that door to the right and just round the passage, that's where the door is. We have an emergency exit outside the doors to my right and down to the end of the corridor, and another outside the main doors behind you. In the unlikely event of an emergency, a staff member will help direct you out the building. We are delighted to have you here to participate and share in this event. We welcome those of you who have been with us for some time now, as well as those of you who are new to the library. The PMI Victorian History Library is the second oldest library in Victoria, founded in 1854. We collect all aspects of Victorian history, along with interstate and national material, which includes and informs the history of Victoria. We have more than 40,000 items on site, and the majority are available for loan. We are the only for loan collection of its type in Australia. Our core collection is local history, and we hold information on most of the towns in Victoria. Just to let you know that we will be taking photographs and videoing throughout the event, and we will use this for promotion and social media for the PMI. If you don't want to be included, please let us know. We're also going to be live streaming tonight's event. Have a look at the displays afterwards that Ellen has set up. It's about all the books, all the stores in Melbourne from our collection. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Aaron Lewin and Tatiana Scott, who will be talking to us tonight about more than nostalgia. For many years, journalist Aaron Lewin has been working with documentary photographer Tatiana to record the stories behind the long-standing shops and traders across Melbourne for the website Tales of Brick and Mortar. This project seeks to share and highlight the history behind these institutions and provide a point of discussion about their social, architectural, economic, and cultural impact within and beyond the local community. Tonight, we are honoured to have some of the shopkeepers who were interviewed in the audience. I don't know, would you put your hands up if you're one of the shopkeepers who were? I think, there we go, thank you. Thank you. This is not a formal lecture. We want it to be interactive, so anytime you want to interrupt, ask questions, or know anything, please feel free to do so. Hand over to Aaron and Tatiana.
Thank you. Should I start? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you very much for the introduction. Right, so I'm Aaron. I'm not the best public speaker, so I'll do my best. But I guess to start in terms of telling you, I suppose, why I started. Can you?
Sorry.
Should I? Can I?
Yeah, tell that up and I'll turn this up.
Sorry.
No, no.
I'm not very good at projecting my voice.
Yeah, this isn't as good as it should be. Let's try that.
So, better? Yeah. Is that okay? Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thanks very much. So yeah, in terms of, I suppose, why I started working on this project, at the time, so kind of going back to 2017, I just finished my uni degree. I studied journalism and business, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't really want to work for, churn out stories every day. It kind of wasn't, so I was kind of actively searching for a project, something, creative outlet, a project, something that would be of interest to me. And I remember kind of at that time, I was reading, like, quite, for whatever reason, it was just, something that often appeared was like websites like Broadsheet and Urbanist and all these kind of websites that focus on a lot of the new business, cafes, new restaurants, new shops that open. And I suppose I remember reading about all these places that opened, and there was quite a lot of publicity, and people were very interested in the story about why these businesses were opening, and why they decided to open a cafe or restaurant or whatever. But I suppose I just started thinking about the fact that these shops, they have stories to tell, but it's not a story that's informed by their history, or it's not a story that's kind of informed by their relationship with customers. So I just started thinking about, I suppose, all these local businesses and shops that have been around for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, for really long periods of time, who have this really strong sense of history, who've been around and developed such strong relationships within the local community, and have these incredible stories to tell. And also the fact that they had seen change kind of come, literally through their shopping in the streets and suburbs, and people change, and the fact that like they were able to observe that history and how our communities are changing. So it was something that I started thinking a bit more actively about. And there are a couple of other things I remember thinking about as well. I suppose the fact that I would have been 24, 25, and I've had a number of different jobs. A lot of my peers had also had a number of different jobs, but it was really interesting to me thinking about these people who had had the same job for decades. And at that time I hadn't really started the project, so I wasn't quite sure, but my vague understanding was that there was still, whenever I'd gone to a butcher or the local baker or whatever, they were still really about their job. Maybe it was in front, but that was my, I guess, perception. And it was just interesting to me that there were these people who were in the same line of work, and they're still really excited about the day ahead, and they're still super passionate about their job and their community, and have built these really strong relationships. So I suppose it was just those kind of a few of those different themes, but also a number of different things that I was thinking about at that time. And then I just remember, I was living in Caulfield at that time, and on Ben Huntley Road, Ben Howe Butcher had a big sign out there, the front of their shop, which said RIP Howe Butcher 1960 to 2017. So it was closing within that month, I think. So I was all these things I was thinking about, and then there was this big sign saying the shop is closing, and I just had this strong sense that the shop is going to close, and they've been around for 40 years or 50, almost 60 years, and their story hadn't been reported. So that strong impact that they would have had within the community, I suppose, is kind of captured in maybe an oral sense or through the customers, but not in a recorded, documented sense. So I remember being very anxious about, going up and approaching him and having a chat with him, but eventually kind of having a chat with him and discussing, what he, I suppose, learned over 60 years being a butcher, about the area, about the industry, about how consumer behaviour had changed, about how the economics had changed over the years and how that impacted what people were buying, about how Ben Huntley Road had changed, and so on and so on. And I wrote a story, and people seemed to be relatively interested. So that was a shop I wasn't really familiar with. I just knew that it was closing, but there was, I suppose, if I go up, it's a bit out of order, but there were, that was the bookshop, Out of Print Books, ETC, which used to be on Ben Huntley Road, that I used to go in all the time. So Ken, I had a chat with him. The Cruising Cuts is the barber on just off Auckland Road, I think, that I go to all the time, who, also, he hadn't been around for as long as some of the other businesses, but super interesting story about migrating to Australia, and setting up a business in a predominantly Jewish area, and developing those relationships, and really interesting. So it's just businesses that I was familiar with, and then as well as just going to shops that it's difficult, I suppose, to tell how long a business has been around for, unless they have like a big sign saying been around for this amount of time, but kind of, having a sense maybe they've been around for quite a long period of time. So anyway, wrote about roughly 10 shops, Mario's and Super Iconic Cafe. And then at some point I did, and Divine Deli as well, is it used to be literally just outside of my street, and someone I've known for a really long period of time. And so eventually all the photos that I took were horrible, but eventually I did an interview on Triple R, which is a kind of local radio station, and so I did the interview, spoke similarly about what I'm talking about now, why I started and how the project has developed over the years. And then Tatiana, who's a photographer, so basically contacted me afterwards, and we started working together. I don't know if you want to come up and chat about you know, what interested you, why you decided to.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we just have to swap.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Tatiana, first time ever that I speak in public. Fine. I heard Aaron being interviewed on Triple R, and I had my own interests in shops and makers, so I am very interested in people that make things and repair things and how things are made and these very specific skills that people have. And through the interview that I was listening at, I thought, oh, there's a little bit of a similar interest there. So I I think I looked through his website, I parked the car, wrote his website, and then looked for his email, and I emailed and said, can we meet? I'm interested, I'm a photographer. And it took a little bit of time to get used to, I think, working together because Aaron wasn't used to have someone walking around, and so it had a bit of a adjustment time. I think the first shop that we did is Frank's in Melbourne Road. I'm
not sure where it
is it
is.
Melbourne?
Sorry, it's somewhere here. We lift it up. Sorry about this. I kind of shuffled them around.
There
There
it
it is,
is.
yes. And yeah, so it was really interesting. His story was really interesting, and I really enjoy the work, and I really like doing the photos, documenting. It's hard work because people have to be comfortable with me taking photos, and they don't know me. They never met me before, and I arrived with a camera. So what we usually do, what we do at the time, I go with Aaron and I sit with the interview and I ask questions and they get to know me a little bit before I take any photos. And usually when we're finishing up with the interview, Aaron asks them to show some things and I take some photos, and then usually we have been like for 2 hours with them and they relax and then I get the best photos. But yeah, I think that the important thing for us is for the people to understand and to feel that we have their best interests at heart, because they never met us before most of the time. So it's a big thing to open up, tell your story, tell your life story, your business story, and let people take photos of yourself in your shop. So I think that's the part that I am very aware of. That
Did you have a set lot of questions to ask them? Like, did you have a criteria that you go in, or would you do it just?
If I just speak, or should I just?
yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll just, yeah, we can talk. So,
Sorry, honey.
No,
no,
that's okay.
so I started in 2017 and we've been kind of working together basically from 2018, the end of 2017 on. So Tatiana and I will do the interview together and then she'll also take the photos and then I'll write out the story. But so I think when I started, I was like meticulously prepared everything. So, like I had a big list of questions, wrote everything down. Well, now I think there is a bit of a rhythm to it where I suppose, I'll do research in advance, but I won't necessarily write down a list of questions because I think if you go in a bit too pre-prepared, I think I listen a bit less. While if I don't have a structure of questions, then I think maybe more able to engage with what people that respond to what people say rather than just get through the questions one by one. So I think that's kind of been my experience. I think the other thing that maybe is worth mentioning, is oftentimes when we interview these, people who run these businesses for such a long period of time, personally, I think honestly always the work they do is incredibly interesting to me. It's often the use of hands. like a skill that I wouldn't even imagine how you develop those skills is something that isn't necessary. Like I don't think there are that many people who are continuing a lot of these skills, be it repairing shoes or tailoring a suit. It's all, the work is like unimaginable to me. But I think that when we initially go in, the people that we interview a lot of the times are a bit reluctant because I think that their story might not to other people. So I think it takes a bit of time for them, not necessarily convincing, but just to try and a bit of persuasion, say like people are interested in these skills that aren't necessarily being continued. And I think that recording some of these stories, I suppose I think it's trying to convey the importance of, documenting their story because, it's not written down and, one day, I think like there's an assumption that these businesses that have been around for a really long time will just be around for forever because they've always been there. You've always gone to the, down to the corner shops, go to the milk bar and buy whatever. So even still, like I just think all that business will be around forever. But so I suppose it's just recording your stories while they're still around. You're able to document how they started, what's changed, how things have changed and so on. And I guess the other thing I think with a lot of these businesses is, I suppose sometimes I think their value can kind of be seen as how successful they are, how commercial they are. So maybe it's a bit of like, it's more than just like economics, I think. Like it's like the actual shop fronts, like even just like one of the things that was mentioned was like the architecture, like even it helps to shape the street and like the streetscape and that sort of thing. And it, I don't know, I think it kind of informs the way that the street looks, how the area looks, how the area feels, how people interact with others. So it's like so much more than like transactional, I think. It's like, the conversations, it's oftentimes a hub for community and conversation. And yeah, I think, I don't know, I still get very excited to do it. I really love writing these stories and interviewing these people, doing these really interesting things every day, I guess.
That clock you photographed in the clock shop, that was fascinating, like the big double clock.
Friends?
You must have seen some fascinating things.
Yeah, yes. Yes, I do. And I look at everything.
If you scroll, it was in the picture you had before.
Should we go the photo? Well, or we can go through the, if that's okay, should we go through the images?
Okay.
So I think it's a good way to talk about the shops and so on.
Yeah. So we're just switching things.
Sorry.
What do you want?
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
So again, not a problem. There we go. That's great.
Do you want to, how do you want to do it?
I'm not sure.
Should we both stand or what do you think?
Do you want to extend?
Oh, I don't know. So yeah, just jump in.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess just going through some of the images. So this is Creative Weeks in CBD, which has been around for a very long time, 50 years, 60 years.
Yeah.
And it's still Abe is he's still actively working there.
Three generations.
Yeah, so 3 generations. And they do a lot of work with people who are going through cancer and just people, they work with a lot of entertainers. They do the variety of work they do is very diverse. So these are some of Tatiana's images. I don't know if you want to speak to them or.
He wasn't keen to be photographed that much.
Sorry.
Sometimes with my work, we get people that are not that keen to be photographed. So, and I see them to take some photos. So it takes a little bit of a skill to not bother them. So I sort of a fine line of you still getting the job done, setting anyone, and it's a hard thing to do. And what I do usually, I talk to them as well. So I put the camera down and I talk to them and ask permission. Can I just photograph you doing this? And usually if they're actually making something and working on something, they are happy, but they are not happy with posing. Abe wasn't particularly keen to be photographed because his family was there and they were keen, so he was okay with it. The other thing about the interview that is interesting with our work is we have very different life experiences. I'm a lot older than Aaron, and I'm an immigrant as well. So when we interview people that left big families and travel when they're young and things like that. I sort of have a little bit of a, I understand what, not exactly, but usually they came in a sort of a bad situation. I didn't, but I have a little bit of an understanding of what they went through. So I have a little bit of that. Just from being older and being from another country as well, and having to learn English and all these things that a lot of the business that we interview are from other places.
I think they open up when they tell them the story they more. That's often the point where they kind of open up, I suppose.
Yeah. So I come with the emotional part. Erin, is very good at getting the community, the part of the community and the architecture and the things. And I usually go, how was living in a family? So I come with it. I want to know what it is behind the shop and how was it that they built their life here. And I have 4 children, and they usually have, a lot of children, or children. And, I can imagine how they did it. Like some shops that they work like 20 hours a day, the patisseries and bakeries. And it's just crazy to think of how the family actually managed to work so hard and still have a family. To have the children and look after them. So I sort of ask a lot of those more personal questions, I think. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree.
Diana, I think you've made a very important point, which is the personal story of the shops that we see that we don't always think about, and it's the struggle, the migrant struggle.
Yeah.
That I've read all of these stories because of the personal connection with Aaron, and many of these stories go back generations to a migrant.
Yeah.
And I think we take that for granted. We don't know the personal story and the personal history.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important, this particular project, to document these incredible stories of struggle and challenge and success,
Perseverance.
hardship.
Yeah. It has a lot of hardship in the stories. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think the other, yeah, sure, I'll just quickly. Yeah, at some point. I think the other thing that I've kind of learned doing this, which is also something I've kind of taken for granted, is a lot of the things that, this might not be very kind of insightful, but like a lot of things that are very much ingrained as part of day-to-day life. I suppose when some of these shops and businesses started in the 1960s, they may have been facilitating for a particular community, but it was very much not done. So I'm thinking we recently interviewed a fruit and vegetable shop in Darra, it was in the city of Darra, and I can't remember what suburb it was in, but they were saying that when they started the business in
Thornbury.
I think it was in Thornbury, but when they started, it was called Martino's Darra Gardens, but when they started the business, people weren't growing zucchinis, and this is what they were telling me, they weren't growing zucchinis, and people weren't eating zucchinis and eggplants and these kind of, these vegetables, I suppose, but they started growing them and selling them to, cater for the Italian kind of community and Greek community. And now, it's crazy to me. Well, not crazy, it's, I like to think that wasn't such a kind of mainstream thing, but it was kind of these migrants who came over and they started these businesses, and they had that's just one example, but there are so many different examples of, pasticerias and just things that, would otherwise not be here, not for some of these shops. That, it's just very interesting. And all the time, there are just things that I just find very difficult to imagine that not being a very ingrained part of day-to-day life, I suppose.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What are you going to do with the project? What form does it take? Is it going to be a blog, or is it?
So it's currently a website. So at the moment together we've done about 60 stories of different shops across Melbourne and the history of the shops. So it's a website at the moment, and would love for it to be a book one day. It's just figuring out the best way of
Do
doing it.
we work
I
with
think.
councils?
Yes, and so we've done a lot of council projects. So we work with different councils. We work with the the city of Darabin, city of Dandenong, they're doing some work with Glenara, and it's all kind of the
Winnie
same.
Ponds.
Winnie Ponds as well, yeah, all with the kind of same focus of capturing the history of these businesses, I guess.
So they commission us for specific shops. So yeah, that's the.
So how many other photos of shops have you got up there?
How many photos? Oh, we have so many.
Which is the oldest shop that you've exhibited?
Is it the baton?
I think it might be the pool that we,
Is the pool one?
yeah, I think so. We interviewed a 5th generation billiard shop in Gertrude Street. I think that's the oldest. I think that goes back to
Harry Evans and
Harry
Sons.
Evans and Sons goes back to the 1880s, 1870s. Same family.
What percentage of stayed in the same family?
A lot of them, I think.
1885.
1885, that one started. What percentage do you think have stayed in the same family? I would say most, like the vast majority.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of loyalty in the family, I find. Even though the kids sometimes go and study something else, they do other jobs, but then once the parents start getting a bit older, they sort of come back because they feel a bit of a loyalty to the shop and to the community and the parents as well.
I think there would be a lot of pressure, I think, to like that contestation of like wanting to do your own thing, but then I guess if you do your own thing, then I don't know what that might necessarily mean for the business. I think often speaking to second generation, third generation or so on, there is a bit of that. I don't know, that's in some instances I found that to be the case where they're wondering which kind of path to follow.
I think it depends how well they get along with the family, and I think it's working with the family, it's pretty important to them.
Sorry, I need to change photos here. Sorry. So this is Rosenberg Shoes, I think, in Chapel Street.
Chapel Street, yeah.
Which has also been around for, I think, 1903, is that right? Very early 20th century.
Yeah.
This is
And Modak.
Modak.
So we have David here from Modak.
If you want, it's up to you. If you want to say if you want to. You don't have to if you want to. Sorry.
Hello, this is a little bit impromptu.
Sorry.
I thought I'd be I thought I'd be hearing about other people's businesses rather than talking about my own, but just a very brief history of my business. It's Modak Motorcycles, and we've been on Elizabeth Street since the 1930s. The business was not started by my father, but he bought into the business in 1955. He'd been working for his brother at 423 Elizabeth Street, and decided he would branch out on his own because his brother seemed to be doing rather better than he was at working for a wage. So when the opportunity arose, he bought Modak Motorcycles, which had been operating since the 1930s. Interestingly, they had two shops, one in Paran, so somewhere probably not far from where we are now, and one in Elizabeth Street. And Elizabeth Street had become quite the home for motorcycles, and there were umpteen motorcycle shops there, and ultimately the previous owners decided to close down the Paran business and keep operating Elizabeth Street, which had always been the place to be. Incidentally, I come from a long line of motorcyclists. My grandfather was a motorcyclist, my father was a motorcyclist, my uncle was a motorcyclist, so I guess it was somehow destined that I should be involved in the business. Anyway, my father bought Modak at 342 Elizabeth Street in 1955, and it was, prior to his ownership, it was mainly survived by wrecking motorcycles. People would sell their old bikes, they wreck them and do quite well. It was selling the parts. But when my father bought the business, he wasn't a great one for taking motorcycles off the road. He wanted to keep them on the road, so he decided the better way to go was to buy new parts, and he imported motorcycle parts from England. from numerous suppliers. This was in the 50s, and motorcycling was really in its heyday. A bit
So
before.
you were with Trumps and Indians and.
Yeah, all of that. Incidentally, you mentioned Indians. Well, one of the breaks my father got was just after the war, the army disposed of their stock of Harley Davidson and Indian parts, and my father and his brother, with whom he was still working at the time, bought a lot of the stock that the army had accumulated and sold the parts off to lots of eager motorcyclists who bought the motorcycles from the army disposals, and so they did quite well out of selling those new parts courtesy of the Australian Army, and that kept them going before my father branched out into Modak and importing new parts from England. They bought crash helmets, and when crash helmets became compulsory, they were a good line, and motorcycle tyres and replacement parts for a lot of machines that were on the road. Australia was one of the biggest buyers of English motorcycles after the Second World War in any country in the world, which is quite amazing when you think of it, because we were a small population, but we loved motorcycles, so there were a lot of them on the road, and it was helped by the bikes that came courtesy of the army. My father and his brother bought 600 motorcycles from the army when they were disposing of them in one lot, and disposed of them through my uncle had a business which was based in Sydney, and he had a branch in Melbourne and in Adelaide, so they disposed of motorcycles through those three outlets, and they had lots of buyers. So that's what put my father on the map really when he got out on his own, and started importing new parts from England, as well as he had some of the Indian and Harley parts which he took with him when he left his brother's employ. So from there he prospered quite well with the help from my mother, who was a vital part of the business. She knew nothing about motorcycles when she came into the business. She was dragged into it, if you like, but she became a bit of a legend, and she worked in the business until she was really in her 90s, and she was a bit of a legend, that she knew so much about motorcycles. When people came and asked her a question, she'd know what they needed and be able to sell it to them. So, as I say, it's a pity that she's not still around, because she's really the one that deserves to be in the business for 50 odd years. And she did receive the City of Melbourne one of the gold awards for being in business for 50 years in our shop. Anyway, she's no longer with us, but there's a lot of people who remember her very fondly for all that time, 50 years or more in the shop. Anyway, our business prospered, and but in the I guess in the 70s, my father had enough and was going to close things down. But I was on the scene and decided that it was my future, so I kept going. We moved from 342 Elizabeth Street in the early 70s, when the Melbourne Underground Authority acquired the whole block where we were for the underground loop. We had to find another home, and my father was very fortunate to have found a shop at 299 Elizabeth Street, which had been Cooper's Hardware back into the very distant past, and they were about ready to give up, so they were happy to sell father the premises at 299, and that's where we have been since the early 70s. You'll see there's a picture of my mother. Anyway, So we've been there in 299 since the early 70s, and around 2017 when these two came into the shop, it was about time when we decided to move away from the shop front because business has changed, and there was really no place for a business selling on motorcycle parts in Elizabeth Street anymore. So we decided that we would let out the shop front, which I have done, but we still operate from around the back of the shop. So we're still in business, and we do online business selling parts all around Australia and a little bit overseas. And I'm ably assisted by my partner Trish, who's in some of the photographs as well. She's taken over from my mother, and I freely admit I wouldn't be in business without her now. She's a vital part. She wraps up parcels and talks nicely to the customers, something that I don't always do. Anyway, that little sign at the front there was on the front, that registered office all parts was my uncle's business at 423 Elizabeth Street, and that was at the top of the entry door, and somehow I managed to get a hold of it, and that's where my father worked with his father at 423, but I thought that was an interesting thing just to have on display.
Yeah, that's cool.
So was it nice to have your story that Tatiana and I want to come and ask you to do a story?
Oh yes, it's certainly a bit of history. I mean, there's a shop full of stuff there that doesn't exist anymore, or in that form anyway. So certainly, I guess it'll be down for quite a long time to come.
I just remember with your story in particular, just after it was
very popular.
Yeah, after it was published, and then I think also when the shopfront closed, all of the different community, the motorcycle groups, I'm sure you would have had, but I just remember to me, let alone to you, just the amount of emails and messages just about
a lot of people thought we were closing down.
Yeah, the response was
we were still going, and hopefully we still will for a little while.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, can I ask you, how did you find your stories? Do people,
Should I get on the microphone?
do you just walk around the various suburbs, or do people?
So I think when I started, it was just going up to different shops and just hoping they were been around for a while and people liked them and just kind of guessing, I guess. And then I think in the years following, it kind of depends, but sometimes it's suggestions. Now that we're doing work for local councils, oftentimes it'll be a collaborative process, I think. I mean, I'm not sure, where between Tatiana and I and the council will kind of come up with a short list, I think, and then that's often how, over the last few years, it's been working with councils. And then every now and then there's just a shop that we want to do, I guess, when time allows, I suppose.
Great photos, Tatiana.
It's the women behind the shops that we and David, you mentioned your mom and your partner, that without them, the shop couldn't keep going, and that's exactly what we see in every story, that the wives, they are running the household, they're looking after the children, and they are behind the business. They are not the face of the business, but without them, the business cannot survive. They do the books, they do the orders, they organize things. It's always in the background. It happening again and again with our stories. So that's a good reminder of especially the really old shops. It's a family business, and without the support of the family, they wouldn't be able to survive.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Rosie's here from RAP.
Yeah.
Have we got the photo close by?
Right at the end.
Oh, they're right at the end, are they? Sorry.
Yeah. We can, but yeah, no, definitely agree. I mean, because we know well, but it's a kind of. This is a very famous Victorian reservoir. And, this is Train World in Brighton.
Yeah, the interesting things about the shops, they're so different and so niche. So it's always interesting. I don't think I ever done a story that was like, oh, that was interesting. But they're always interesting. And it's usually things that I never thought about. With Rosalie's story, one of the really interesting things that she mentioned, it's not there, was she had one of these, she had a toy that was a little cat or a little dog that people with dementia really loved because it looked like they could breathe. Is that right, Rosalie? And it's a toy shop. I wouldn't think they would have sort of such an amazing story behind one of the toys, and that was really interesting to me. So that was interesting. And Rosalie had her prize objects as well that she collected over the years. Do you want to tell Rosalie?
I might be able to walk, but at least I can talk.
This is in, it's about Fairfield. Yeah, sorry.
It's a good looking one. There is Cat. She's supposed to be here, but she has 2 tiny children. She probably has given us a miss. You'll notice in a rather pale way, the name of the shop is called Wrapped in It.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's very interesting how we came to have that name. I came to Melbourne at the age of 22 to go on with my opera studies. I was an opera singer in South Australia. And I got that bar because they wouldn't pay me what Adelaide paid me to be a floral artist. And they said, well, the Lord Mayor of Adelaide's granddaughter is running the gift wrap bar, and I'm sure you'd like to work with her. Well, I didn't, because she used to lick all the ribbons. And not only that, she was having 3-hour lunch hours with her boyfriend, whom she did later marry just as well. And I was brought up in this unbelievably Gestapo prison camp of Adelaide Mire, where you didn't put a foot out. If you were 2 minutes back, from lunch, you were in trouble. So I watched the whole thing, and of course, as a floral artist, I picked up the professional gift wrapping very quickly. And then I started inventing things out of the ribbon, making flower shapes. And by this time, I was watching this girl play me for a sucker with her 3-hour lunch hours. So I went up to the manager and said to him, do you want this gift wrap bar to make money? And he said, oh, we'd love it to. I said, get rid of her. So he did. And the boys from Display, within a couple of days, it was so amazing, came round and said, we've got 189 parcels for you to wrap up, all in purple and white, and they're going to be hung in groups of 5, and they're going in every window of Maya and hanging from the ceiling on every floor. I said, okay, on one condition. She said, what's that? I said, you put a little card saying gift wrap bar, 1st floor, Longstanding Street, on every group of parcels. Now, I didn't tell the controller, So the Saturday before Mother's Day, the whole week before, we were absolutely swamped. And we were running, wrapping here, wrapping there. And we would say to the lady or the man, "Is that all right, sir? Or is that all right, madam?" And they would say, wait for it, "I'm wrapped in it." And then we'd all burst out laughing because it's such a funny thing to say on a gift wrap part. And we said, "I'm wrapped in it." And I thought to myself, if ever I have my own shop, I'm going to call it Wrapped in It. So that's where the name came from. But this is not my first shop. I actually opened up a shop just after I married when I was 26 in Caledonian Lane. You might know Caledonian Lane, around the corner from David Jones. And we called that one the gift wrap shop, spelt the French way. And then I started to work for a company called John Sands. You all know them. They are now having their cards printed in China, so I've thrown them out of the business. But I made every single design for every bow for 27 years that they ever put out in their range. And I used to have 9 girls and casuals working for me. But there was this need to be out in the public. And we started our first shop in Northcote 35 years ago, which is pretty wonderful. And so we're 35. We just turned 35. And we're going to have such a ripper birthday sale in about a week's time. But yeah, so it's really been incredibly interesting. But the shop has evolved. It really has evolved. The gifts, it was the children. The children wanted to shop in the shop, and so we had to get into the ABC toys and various things. So it is pretty much now a toy shop, but I love what I do. It's great. So I'll be working at 90. Thank you.
I'll go back to maybe the training. I'll talk about the text generation modernizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, this is train world in Bay Street, I think.
Yeah.
We do model trains and yeah, I don't know. My partner worked here for a very long time selling trains, so that's kind of how I got onto it, I guess. And yeah, I guess something that is, I suppose, quite interesting is how the shops, I mean, as Rosie kind of touched on, I guess, how they evolve over time. And as, you know, each generation comes, I think that, you know, when there's that kind of transition point between the different generations, the shop, I guess, evolved, new ideas, and I think that's just something that I've, I guess, observed over the years doing these interviews. But yeah, and then this is a very well-known bakery, Sergeant's Cakes in Reservoir, which is really delicious and well worth the drive.
Yeah, it's the second generation,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Did you read this? Actually, I was trying to, because he grew up going, am I right saying he grew up living nearby and going regularly to the bakery? So maybe he was saying he lived on the same street or something. I suppose the other thing that I guess I found interesting is I think a lot of these shops are framed as like a nostalgic, you know, sometimes framed as like a relic of, you know, years gone by, and like there's a bit of curiosity about, you know, how, I suppose, the way that we used to shop, and I think all that's, I suppose, true in a sense, but I think something that I found really interesting over the years is how vital so many of these shops still are, and how, you know, like the one that I always think about is shoe repairs, and like how critical shoe repairs still are to so many people. So it's, yeah, I really...
No, not in the sport.
Yeah, and it's, I think sometimes it's kind of funny. I don't really think of it as like a nostalgic thing. I think it's still very relevant and contemporary, and these shops are still very important and still have huge, you know, for all of them, they still have that massive group of customers who come in and, you know, shop and interact, and yeah, so it's they're all very still very important to Melbourne communities. I think.
Have they been positively or negatively impacted by COVID because they're so local? Would they have had more people coming to them in lockdowns?
What do you?
I think the bakeries and patisseries they did, they were pretty busy, but yeah, it depends of the type of shop.
Yeah.
I think it was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's, and I think it just depends on like whether they were kind of, I mean, for certain businesses, whether they were actually able to open,
Yeah.
or like, you know, I'm sure that some of these businesses who are, I suppose, more modern would probably more likely have like an e-commerce presence, and then they'd be able to sell online. But if you're kind of not doing food and you can't open your doors, like I think like the jewelers and the people who do repairs and stuff, they're not able to open.
Yeah.
But like plant shops, I remember speaking to the one plant shop and he made it a killing. It was very successful.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you done anything on the job warehouse?
Honors.
Yeah.
We didn't get the honors and they're closed. Yeah.
Any more questions?
If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you both very, very much for sharing these wonderful stories. I think it's just given us a little taste.
Yeah.
And I think that what I've come away with is that every shop has the most wonderful history and the story behind it. And they all Victoria, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
So thank you both very much, and on behalf of the library, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you all please join us for a cup of tea at the back of the room, and thank you again for coming tonight.
No, thank you. It's okay.